No. Oh. Hey, this morning, you guys know I'm a little ADD anyway, and if you don't know me, I somewhat enjoy hunting. And so this morning I am trying to, because I'm a morning person, I get up in the morning and I'm fine-tuning things, and I look outside, and at 10 yards there's this beautiful doe walking quietly next to the house. And perhaps for a variety of reasons, for some reason I keep my crossbow at my desk. Everything within me, and I can't do it, don't worry, Mom, because it's illegal and my mom would kill me. But everything within me wanted to go out there and shoot this beautiful creature that God has given us. And after that, I was pretty much a waste on trying to get ready for this morning, because all I could think about was, could I hunt that if there's a certain distance? And it's funny though, because I think sometimes the disciples had trouble concentrating on the right things. And so today we're working through the book of Mark slowly. Don't worry, it'll take us less time than it took the book of Luke. But as we're working through, the disciples, we're coming to a familiar story in chapter 6. And pretty much, although you never know when I'm going to switch it up, you can pretty much figure out where we're going to be because of where we were last week. So if you read ahead in chapter 6, that's where we are. But we're in Mark chapter 6, and we're going to turn to verse 30. And this might be a familiar story for some of you. And if you have subtitles, it's called The Feeding of the 5,000. And so you're immediately going to kind of figure out what's about to go on here. And it says this in chapter 30, it says, the apostles returned to Jesus from their ministry tour, and they told him all they had done and taught. Then Jesus said, let's go off by ourselves to a quiet place and rest a while. He said this because there were so many people coming and going that Jesus' apostles didn't even have time to eat. And so the apostles, these 12 people, he had appointed them to be apostles, which means the sent ones, they'd be his representatives, and they really didn't do anything for a long time. They just kind of hung out with Jesus and saw what he did. But then Jesus had sent them out. He sends them out to do some cool things. They come back, and they're sort of like, if anyone ever been on a missions trip? Anyone? We're looking at some. It's interesting because if you go on a missions trip, you come back and you're pretty excited, and you want to tell everybody about what you've done and your experience. Anyone? You can vouch for me, and some of you do that with your vacations and slideshows, and I really don't want to see them. No, but I find that like when I go overseas and I come back, I try not to make every example of something about Kenyan culture because I just came back from there, or Ethiopia. But it's you've had some cool experiences, you've done some cool things, and you want to share, and you kind of picture that with the disciples. This is like their first tour out by themselves. Cool stuff happens, and they want to come back and tell Jesus, and probably try to impress Jesus too, because they were a little bit sometimes trying to impress him, and so they're excited, and they just want to talk about all this stuff they've done, but they're so busy they didn't even have time to eat. Now, some of you, we have no idea what that is, right? We're never don't have time to eat. Like who are these people who forget meals? But sometimes if you've been busy at work, you kind of you look up, it's like 3 o'clock. You're like, well, do I eat lunch? Do I eat dinner? Do I eat dinner? What is this meal I should eat? Or I think a lot of times at a wedding, you really have to be disciplined as the bride and groom to actually eat. And now they do a lot. They serve you first and different things because you get up, you're talking to everyone, you're doing all these things, and quickly you can find yourself that you haven't eaten. Did you guys eat? Oh, yeah. They just got back from their honeymoon. It's that kind of thing. They've been so busy, maybe they don't have a time. It says so they left by boat for a quiet place where they could be alone. And so they kind of take off across the lake. We're not exactly told exactly where, but they kind of shoot across the lake so they can get away from everybody. It says, but many people recognized them and saw them leaving. And people from many towns ran ahead along the shore and got there ahead of them. And so you kind of picture maybe they're cutting across a little section of the lake, but people see it and they're really excited and they're like running along the lake, like watching the boat, like, oh, there they are, we're going to make it. So all these people are pouring out and they come out because they're so excited about Jesus. And it says, Jesus saw the huge crowd as he stepped from the boat. And he had compassion on them because they were like sheep without a shepherd. So he began teaching them many things. And Jesus, had compassion on them. I don't like to throw out a lot of Greek words, but this one's just fun to say. Splankmizomai. I call it splunky in my head. It's this Greek word. It's like they kind of pictured their emotions coming from their guts. But Jesus was so moved, not like diarrhea moved. He's just, he's so moved for people. You can picture that when there's things that draw our compassion, right? Some of you're watching TV late at night. There's a picture of a puppy. And your credit card's coming out. You know what I mean? Like, you're like, oh, that poor dog, Some of you know, and you're not wanting to say anything now, but I know who you are. No, okay. Or some of you, they show the picture of the kid and they're starving. And, there's adults starving too, but you don't show a picture of a guy who's hungry and needs a sandwich. Like, you're like, well, maybe that'd be a fundraiser for guys. Guys, he needs a sandwich. But you show the kids and your heart goes out, and next thing you know, you're sponsoring a child, which is all good stuff, don't get me wrong. But, it's something that really pulls and gives you compassion. And so Jesus, he has compassion. So even though he wants a little vacation, they want a time off, he wants to do something with his disciples, he's drawn from his compassion to do something. And, compassion leads to action. And, the Bible really, Christianity teaches us, and this is a hard thing, I think, especially in our culture, because in our culture, we're very individualistic, which is a big fancy word to say it's all about me, right? And we often joke, we were joking about this Wednesday night at the Bible study, that sometimes life feels like it's a movie and it's all about me, because I'm in every scene. You guys are just the bit characters who come in and out, and I appreciate your role. You're the ones that make the Wikipedia article, but you're like, hey, who was that? That was villain number 2 in that last movie. No, but because, I tend to think of my life as being about me because, well, I'm there all the time, every scene. And you probably, though, you think of life as about you because you're there in every scene. It'd be weird if you're not in every scene. I don't know how that happens. But, but we tend to think about us. When you look at a picture, what's the first thing you look for? Yourself. Like, it's a group shot, you're like, oh, where am I? Did I close my eyes? Then we look at everyone else. But most of us, we naturally kind of look for ourselves. But Christianity, faith in Jesus, means we live more other-centered. Philippians 2:4 says, don't look out only for your own interest, but take an interest in others too. I like how the ESV says it. It says, let each of you look not only to his own interest, but also to the interest of others. Christianity is others-centered. It's about serving others. Even it's funny, I was thinking about that, this is not the offering time, don't worry. But with like church offerings, we run on church offerings. And, there's things that sometimes we'd like to do, we just don't have the money, but we just wait till we have the money. Like, it took us a while to get, you guys like the building? Yeah, we like this building, right? We didn't have this building. We had to wait. We didn't have the money, so we had to wait. And we're going to work on trying to buy it, but that's we're going to have to wait a little for that too. But there's things we want sometimes, and it's funny because when you're at church, everyone knows how they think the money should be spent, right? Like, if we put everything up for a vote, we would never spend anything because we'd argue about how everything gets spent. But here's the thing. Our church has made a commitment to missions because a percentage of what we bring in, we fund missionaries to go around the world. We fund people to do things in other places. And that's because it's not all about us. And there's this what we have, we give. Because even Christianity, even church is not just about us in this building. It's this bigger picture of what God's doing around the world. And so Christianity should always be other-centered. Now, that doesn't mean they're not going to take a vacation. Jesus occasionally needs that break. We're not going there. But he has compassion because there's sheep without a shepherd. Now, if you read the Hebrew Bible, you kind of get this concept, and it comes up in Ezekiel, and I didn't put the verses in there because I want to skip around a little bit, but I'm in chapter 34. Therefore, you shepherds, hear the word of the Lord. As surely as I live, says the sovereign Lord, you abandoned my flock and let them be attacked by every wild animal. And though you were my shepherds, you didn't search for any sheep when they were lost. Jesus, what does he do? He says he goes out for the lost sheep. You took care of yourselves and you left the sheep to starve. Therefore, you shepherds, there's judgment. Says this is what the sovereign Lord says. Now consider these shepherds my enemies, and I will hold them responsible for what has happened to my flock. Not good things. So there's this bad shepherd. Jesus, we did the Jesus is a while back. I think we did the good shepherd, because Jesus is the good shepherd. The good shepherd is this, starting verse 11. I will search myself and find my sheep. I will be like a shepherd looking for his scattered flock. I will find my sheep and rescue them for all the places they were scattered on that dark and cloudy day. I will bring them back home into their own land. I will give them good pasture land. I will tend my sheep. I will search for the lost ones. And so it's this contrast of, some people who were the leaders over Israel, not good shepherds. What does a shepherd do? I know we're not too agricultural, although we are in Wyoming now, so, we're no longer downtown Dover. I mean, it would be weird if you had sheep in downtown Dover. Not as weird here. But anyone here a shepherd? What do they call shepherds, right? The sheep people. Most of us, we don't have sheep. But the sheep, the idea of the shepherd is you take care of them. And, we always have that sort of the quintessential, like, shepherd's hook thing with the little thing. So you could beat things and hook things and bring things. But the shepherd, it means that if Jesus is going to shepherd, he's going to love these people. He's going to do things even if it's not convenient. Would you like a vacation? Yeah. But doing things and loving people isn't always convenient. I remember one time I was working on a sermon about community. It was when I worked somewhere else, and I'm like, so it wasn't here. So you can't try to guess who this person was. But I'm working on this, and I'm thinking about community, what it means to live in community, and I get a phone call at 5 a.m. And I answer. And it's, hey man, do you have a chainsaw? Yes, what do you need? And long story short, I didn't really want to go, to be honest, because it was 5 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday. I had to preach in a few hours. Next thing I know, I went and got a chainsaw. I'm driving out Route 10 trying to find a tree had fallen on a power line, and it's like I had to go cut the thing because they didn't have a chainsaw, even though they worked for Comcast. Oop, I didn't. We'll delete that later. And next thing I find myself cutting this tree for a large company because they didn't provide the chainsaw, and all I wanted to do is go back, drink my coffee, and get ready to preach. But my friend was the guy who worked for Comcast. Part of being in community means you do things that are inconvenient, even if you don't want to get up at 5 a.m. and go cut things. And, doing things for people who have need. Now, I enjoy the teaching in Africa. Don't get me wrong. I love it, right? It's fun. But I can almost guarantee you that I'm going to get asked to teach a class at the most inconvenient time. It's like a busy season of my life, and it's like, hey, Jeff, could you teach Psalms and Proverbs and wisdom literature in Ethiopia in a month and a half? You're like, sure. Let me remember anything I learned about Psalms and wisdom literature. But I go to serve because they need it. And I taught Galatians this time, and we've been doing Galatians here, so hopefully you get some of the fruit of that. But it was not the most convenient time for me to try to, my day off was spent learning and studying about, Aristotle and rhetorical theory and all kinds of cool stuff. But here's the thing. It's not always convenient, but it was what served the church in Kenya. And so we do things to serve other people if we love and have compassion on them. And so Jesus, would have been great to have a vacation right now. He wanted the time of the disciples, but he has compassion on them. It says, verse 35, late in the afternoon, his disciples came to him and said, this is a remote place. It's already getting late. Send the crowds away so they can go to nearby farms and villages to buy something to eat. You kind of wonder, is this sort of an altruistic concern that, hey, I want to make sure that people get something to eat? Or are the disciples just kind of like, dude, they had their time, let's get rid of these folks. Maybe I got a sandwich hidden, I don't want to share it. We just want to get rid of them. Maybe this is like, hey, let's just go on vacation now. We gave them a little time, but we want to move on. But Jesus said, you feed them. Now, it's interesting because he's just sent them out before, and he tells them what? Don't worry about this stuff. You're not supposed to bring stuff. You go out. So he knows they didn't exactly leave with anything. Maybe they had a hidden sandwich or something, but they probably ate that when they were on their way out because they're kind of living on faith, right? And so they just came back from this faith journey. They're not exactly stocked up on supplies. There's no MREs. What's our favorite number? Like, do you like the 9? I don't know. They're ancient Palestinian MREs. But it says, if they say, they ask, with what? We'd have to work for months to earn enough money to buy food for all these people. ESV says it this way: Shall we go and buy 200 denarii worth of bread and give it to them to eat? Now, denarii was like, if you had a regular, carpentry job, like a regular labor job, a denarius was your day's wage. So it would be 200 days' wages. Now, you do the math. That's a lot of time. That's a lot of work. There's a lot of people there. And so, 200 days worth of labor, it's not an unreasonable question, right? Like, hey, we would have to have 200, and there's no McDonald's here, so, they're kind of out in the country. Mark makes a point to say they're out in the wilderness, so they're not, it'd be like if you're driving, I had to go out to Sandtown. Some of you know immediately where I had to go, right? The dump is just fun, but some of you don't get it. You're definitely a redneck American when you're like, dump day, because not only do you get rid of things, sometimes you bring things back. Because every time you at the dump, there's some dude like, hey, you getting rid of that? No, I'm just carrying it around, and so you end up swapping things. Like, ooh, I'll take that. You take that, and sometimes you see something out there, you're like, oh man, I saw this huge deer rack. You remember that? That was crazy. We went to the dump one time. It's man time. We're gonna go throw stuff in a rotten, stinking hole. Want to come? Yeah, come in. You see some stuff, including, giant seagulls that you're like, what have you been eating and why are you that color? They're like the color of these chairs. They're supposed to be white. I don't know if they're just dirty or something has affected their pigment or they've, eaten something there that's making them into a superhero slowly. Someday it's going to become Pigeon Man. I don't know. Or woman, equal opportunity for our superheroes here. But, it's a lot. Anyway, it doesn't seem like it says, how much bread do you have? Go and find out. They came back and reported we have 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. And we think of loaves, we're thinking giant loaf. It's probably like these little barley loaves. So this is like, it's not, a giant fish like a 500-pound tuna. We're talking like sardines, so it's, really, I always use the example, it's kind of like a Lunchable. And then if we look at John, this is where it's fun, because this is one of the miracles that makes it in all 4. See, it's going to be a miracle, right? Something cool is going to happen, because it's a Jesus story. It'd be like, it would be a terrible story if I'm like, and then they went home hungry, and everyone was angry. They were hangry. They wanted Snickers. But, we read in Luke, we read in John, that they stole a little kid's lunch from this, and, they took his, I don't know if they stole it, but I mean, you kind of wonder if the kid offered it up. But, he's got, a couple little granola bars and some sardines, and so, disciples, they didn't have anything, it's just this thing. And so, there's like 5,000 hungry people there, and it says men. It was just a way of counting. I know that's terribly, insensitive and, whatever. That's the way they counted it. So we don't know how many were there. We don't know how many children. We know there's at least one boy because he gave up his lunch in John. So we know it's like 5,001 people at least, But it's probably more. There's a lot more people. And it's interesting because if you read, this is one of those stories, a miracle story that shows up in all 4. And so you kind of read some other extra details. I try to stay in Mark when I'm in Mark, but you can't help but read some of these other things. And, the 12 suggests, he sends away. Philip, John worries about the budget. He's reasonable. Some of you are Philips, well, that doesn't make sense financially because 200 days worth, and we could do other things with that. That could support our ministry. Some of you are doing the math right now. You're like, yes, Jesus, send them away. Let them get their own free lunch. Andrew, it was interesting though. He starts with what they had and he brings it to Jesus. He's like, "Hey, I got a couple of sardines and some granola bars. Here's a boy with 5 small barley loaves. But how far is that going to go?" And so they were thinking. And the question is, what are they thinking? What are they thinking in this moment? They're totally misreading the situation. They should be thinking, if we had a guy who could do supernatural stuff, heal people, raise people from the dead, maybe we could do something here, right? Because they do. They got that supernatural guy, but they're focused on, this is all we got. We don't, there's nothing you could do. I mean, you could raise the dead, sure, but you can't get us lunch. Because we're out in the middle of nowhere. That was my whole point with Sandtown. You're out in the middle of nowhere. I get off on a story sometimes. I'm like, what was the story of this? Look, a doe. Anyway, where were we now? But it's all I have is this. And sometimes faith is really just being faithful with what little you already have. They didn't have everything they needed, but they took what they had, and they kind of go, Jesus, here we have this. And, then Jesus told his disciples to have the people sit down in groups on the green grass. So they sat down in groups of 50 or 100. This is sort of the sit down. This would be the posture of a banquet and different things. And they're in groups, which is sort of reminiscent of Israel when they're out in the desert and they sit down in groups. And it's green grass, which only Mark mentions, which tells us that it's sort of Passover-ish time, so it kind of adds to that imagery. And maybe when I think green grass, I think Psalm 23. No, Psalm 23. It doesn't look like it should be Psalm, though. No. But Psalm 23, some of you know that because I'm going to read it at your funeral later. If you don't know any other psalm, it's okay, you're going to die. Some of you before me. Some of you are waiting to kill me after this, so maybe not. But if you don't know any other psalms, you probably know Psalm 23. The Lord is. We're going to sing it. We're going to say it in like a mix of versions, though. We're going to little King Jamesy, a little NASB, a little ESV, little NIV, little I don't know V. This is a Psalm of David. The Lord is my shepherd. I have all that I need. He lets me rest in green meadows. Further down, you prepare a feast for me. It's sort of reminiscent of that. Again, Jesus, the good shepherd. All this stuff's going on here. It says this in verse 41. Jesus took the 5 loaves and 2 fish. He looked up towards heaven, blessed them. Then breaking the loaves into pieces, he kept giving the bread to the disciples so they could distribute to the people. He also divided the fish for everyone to share. They all ate as much as they wanted. Afterward, the disciples picked up 12 baskets of leftover bread and fish. A total of 5,000 men and their families were fed. Now, it's interesting because I often make the joke because, there's no Bible verse that says you have to pray for your meal. But if you go out with someone and you just came from church, you don't know, because you don't know their prayer thing, right? You're like, is this a prayer before the thing? And then there's that awkwardness where you've started to eat and then you realize they're praying and then you're like, I was just seeing what to be thankful for, there's all kinds of, like if you go out for ice cream, do we have to pray over the ice cream? If I skipped the meal, do I have to pray? And somebody posted, I think it was Carolina posted the John Christ video. And so if you go in the Facebook group, there's a whole, list of things that you can figure out when to pray because, do you pray for the appetizer? These are serious things. Do you pray at the salad? If it takes a long time between courses, do you pray again? Can we just pray before we go out to eat? Some of you prayed that she would go out with you. Does that count? Some of you prayed he wouldn't ask. Do you have to pray over a latte? There's milk. It's substantive. I don't know. Anyway, it's always that weird Christian moment when you're out because you don't know who's going to pray, what we should pray, who should pray. And then I always get tasked with praying because apparently nobody else can pray. If there's a pastor, it's like, it's so rare, when I don't get asked to pray. People are like, do you mind praying? Usually at weddings, it's like, do you mind praying? Well, yes, I do. Hate praying, bad job advice. And so it says they ate as much as they wanted. Now, some of you probably don't even read that because you're American. We pretty much eat as much as we want, and then some, right? Like we must have invented the buffet. Because, you don't just have one plate. If you have one plate at a buffet, we make fun of you. Now, one plate's probably all you needed, but we don't do that. We eat to get more. Now, if you go in other countries, Just and I were talking, sometimes you get food, it's on the plate, and you're like, wait a minute, there's still more plate. Like, why, but it says they ate as much as they wanted. It'd be like dieting. It's like low-fat ice cream, So they ate as much as they wanted. I start thinking about this with the disciples because, how many trips did they make? Remember, they had to sit down. I did some math. Now, I did it with a calculator because I wasn't real sure. I gave, my bill was $10.85 for something the other day, and I gave someone $21, and just the look of sheer terror on their face as they're trying to figure out what to do with change, because, math is hard when it's pressure. Some of us like math, some of us don't. There's this thing called a calculator. It does all the math for you. But so I did some math here. Now, let's say 15,000 people. Let's say each, because it's 5,000 people plus, 5,000 men plus women and children. So if it's 15,000 people, 50 per group, 12 disciples, that's 25 trips each disciple has to make up and back to Jesus. Or if it's 15,000, 100 per group, 12 disciples, that's 12.5 trips, or 13, 12, whatever you want to, if it's even 5,001 people, because we know there was the boy with the lunch. That's between 4 and 8 trips. So picture this with the disciples. They're told to go remember, they know, we don't know if the rest of the people know that all there is Lunchable. All there are a couple of fish, a couple of granola bars. They're getting some to go hand out to the group. They're like, I didn't even think we had this much. And you're handing it out to the one group, and you're thinking, man, the next group's going to be mad because there's not any more. I know. You go up. Okay. But man, that next group's going to be, they're like up to 12 trips, up to 25 trips. We don't know. It's a bunch of trips. And, at some point they had to go, I'll bet Jesus got more. Because at some point they had to switch from having this sort of unbelief of, man, how are we going to feed all these people to, man, Jesus is doing something cool here. And what's that like? I don't know. And so, and then it says they had 12 baskets of leftover bread and fish. You know why they had 12 baskets? I think Jesus did that just so each one of them had to carry back leftovers. They had more left over than they started. Think of that. We went from, we don't have enough to feed these people, to a ridiculous amount of food. And everyone was full, not dieting full. They ate as much as they wanted. And really in the Gospel of Mark, all the stuff we're seeing that Jesus does, all the stuff we're seeing is building this idea, who is Jesus? Now we know. Partly because you're in church, so you've probably heard a little bit about Jesus, and partly because, we skipped ahead to the gospel, and we kind of told the punchline of the joke. We know the end of the story. We know who Jesus is, but it's building this point, who is this Jesus? Some people, this might be the first time you've heard this story, and you think, this is pretty crazy, because it is. This is not a normal thing. There's times, though, my wife and I sometimes, you invite a couple of people over and a lot more people show up, you know what I mean? You're like, fishes and loaves, fishes and loaves, fishes and... You did it once, Jesus, you can do it again. But ultimately what we're seeing is Jesus is our shepherd, our provider. The Lord is my shepherd. He's going to provide for all the needs. The shepherd is just to provide food, water, safety. Jesus provides. He shows himself to be the good shepherd. He cares for people. He cares for us. I get stressed over what I don't have or do have. You get stressed because you feel like, how am I going to provide for it? How is this going to happen? But God will provide. It's not always on our timing. It's not always exactly how we wanted. We may not even be full all the time, but God cares. God provides. God sees our need. God cares for our need. And ultimately, God supplies our need, even when we don't see it coming. He took meager resources they had, and he multiplied it. Jesus takes the little we have to offer, he multiplies it. That's good math. It's easy to be self-sufficient. It's easy to, or at least comfortable. But, many of us, here's the thing, we will trust God with our eternity. You'll come to church, you'll say, I'm saved by the blood of Jesus, which is true. We don't often use, maybe you don't use those terms, but you say, I'm right with God because, I'm confident that I can trust Jesus with my eternal salvation, but we won't trust him with our day-to-day needs. You say, I'm going to trust God for my eternity, but I don't know if he's going to supply lunch tomorrow. I don't know if he's going to supply rent. It's easier sometimes to trust him with the big things, but sometimes it's harder to trust him with the little things. But God will provide. I love the fact, now Jesus could have done anything he wanted, right? Anyone ever see Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs? Yes. He could have done that. That would have been cool. And if you know the story, as Moses, Exodus, they leave, and basically they don't have food. They're out in the desert, and if you watch the VeggieTales version, I want to go back to Egypt. We were in slavery. But they're kind of grumbling and complaining while they're out in the desert. Oh, you got us out here, now you're going to let us die. And there's this story where, they don't have any food, and God makes basically this weird bread rain from the sky. So that's kind of like Cloudy with Meatballs. And it's interesting because they call it manna, we say. Hebrew, it's manna, which means, what is that? What is it? It's manna. Manana, na, hey. And so, God provides the debt. So he could have done Cloudy with a Chance of Meatball, spaghetti falling from the sky, because he's God. Jesus is God in the flesh. But he doesn't. And one thing I like about it is, who does he do it through? Yeah. These apostles that just went out and did this cool stuff, and then they kind of had no faith that God could really do anything else in this situation. And then he kind of puts them back in the driver's seat, and he gives them the task: you feed them, you do it. And I think the importance of that is the fact that when Jesus is not earthly here right now. I notice occasionally some dudes like, I am the reincarnation of Jesus. That translates to, I am crazy. I was watching an interview one time, and everyone's like, yes, and we think this is Jesus. And I'm like, no, that's just some dude. Like, it was weird because I knew the interviewer too, but that's a whole other thing. But, ultimately then, we get to be, we often say it, we get to be God's hands and feet. And he gives it to the disciples to do because they're supposed to do the work of Jesus when he's gone. Ultimately then, we're supposed to do the work of Jesus when he's gone. We're supposed to have compassion on people like Jesus had compassion on people. We're supposed to do the things that Jesus did. We become his hands and feet, and ultimately we demonstrate God's love and power and justice today to people. This week, remember to demonstrate God's love to the world. We're given that task. Christianity isn't just this thing we believe and then we go to church on Sunday, we can check it off, we're holy, we took a picture, we posted on Instagram, there's a picture of my coffee cup and my Bible so people know that I at least have a coffee cup and a Bible, not that I read the Bible, but great pictures. People taking Instagram pictures, it's always the same page. Suspect. No. But faith is something we do. It changes the way we live. It changes the way we act and react. There's a big project coming up. We've been talking a lot about the Code Purple Firefly Project. May not be your thing. You may not get to take off. Don't get me wrong. But it's one of the many ways that we do tangible things for Jesus. And honestly, there's a lot of things we do. We don't even really advertise that much here. I don't want to say publicly, because right now this is being broadcast. Not that we're hiding it, but we don't always want to be like promoting it, like, oh, look at us, we do so much. But we really are an outwardly focused church because we're supposed to be a blessing to the community. We're supposed to be a blessing to people. And if you're a follower of Jesus, if you say, I'm doing this Jesus thing, it's great. Don't get me wrong. I do like everyone being here at church on Sunday. We get this whole other section this week full. Everyone's liking the 10:10 section. We're going to have to make this the 10:10. We'll set up this way. It was weird. People were coming in. They're like, my back pew in the 10:10 is gone. Because when you're late, it always feels awkward, right? You're like, oh, now I didn't mean you. No, not looking at anyone. But I forget where I was going. Point being, oh yeah, I don't always like to broadcast everything we do because, we want to do the things that God's calling us to do, but we don't want to be bragging about it all. And that's the weird thing about being an American with social media, because, you can act like you're doing everything for the community, but not be doing anything. You can act like you're doing stuff for Jesus, but not really doing anything. And we as a church want to be people who are living out our faith and acting differently in the world. And the world should be a better place because we're here. Wyoming should be a better place because of deep water. This greater Dover area should be a better place because of deep water. It's interesting. I'm not going to tell you who sent me the email because I don't want to say it publicly. I got this funny email from a government agency because they know who we are and what we do, and we're acting as a liaison with a homeless population and some things going on, and it's kind of crazy. I'm like, that's just weird. We're a small church in Wyoming, Delaware, and we're getting these government agencies contacting us about, being liaisons to different communities. It's kind of crazy, but it's because we do the things that God does. We love and have compassion on people. The 5,000 people, after they got fed, they couldn't feed Jesus back, right? Out in the middle of nowhere, they got no more food. Well, they did have the 12 basketfuls they gave back. Point being, we live out our faith by what we do. And we get to be a part of the things that Jesus is doing today. And that's our honor, that's our privilege. And as worship team comes back to play, would love to, if you're still checking things out, would love you to fill a connection card out. Saw a funny